What's up everybody, Garrett back here, and I'm here to give you my final review of part 3 of the Fear Street series, 1666. Alright, so before we start, I'm gonna get a little of this on here, a little CK1 action, and they'll be ready to go. Alright, so Fear Street 1666 is the final installment of this trilogy in this little Fear Street movie. All right, so my thoughts here. Honestly, I kind of found this to be the biggest disappointment out of the whole thing. I wasn't really a fan of this one. It kind of lost me. I will say that my favorite thing about all this was my favorite thing, which was about all three of these, was the aesthetics. So even though it did take place in 1666, and I mentioned this in my last videos, if you guys haven't checked those out, just check them out below. And I talk about, I thought this was going to be the one I was going to like the least because I'm not a huge period piece guy. I would rather watch something 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I knew this was going to be a little bit of a struggle for me. The aesthetics, as far as the environment, as far as the costumes and stuff like that, looked great. They kind of recycled a lot of the actors from the other ones. I know it was almost like the girl's dream, or she was, there portraying Sarah Fear, but honestly it was hard because this character of Sarah Fear was hyped up through these two first parts, and for you to actually just get that same character of the girl that we've seen in the first two films play Sarah Fear was kind of a turnoff a little bit for me, because you were just kind of hyped to find out like who is this person, and you had to kind of watch her portray that role. And, that was a little bit tough. I think they should have just did all new actors in this one, not try to recycle them through, because to me, those characters are already characters in this. So now to try to portray them as different characters was a little bit odd for me. So I'm going to say overall, I don't want to make this long, I like this one the least. I don't think that the payoff was big enough. I feel like they almost just tried to make it too complicated. It's a Fear Street movie, guys, and this last one didn't feel like a Fear Street book to me. But again, I haven't read tons of Fear Street books, and at least in a long, long time, so I could be very wrong, and maybe some of them did take place in earlier times like this, but I just felt like it was getting a little bit too much, and they tried to make it too twisting and turning, where I feel like in a Fear Street book, like, simpler is better. There's a big end scene where they go back to the mall, which I do love the mall. Seeing stores like Gadzooks in there just brings back a ton of memories. Getting some of those old 90s songs and stuff in there brings back a lot of memories. But I think overall the way that they kind of intertwine this all together could have been a little bit better. So I'm going to say I don't think I would ever go back and watch this one again. I'm not going to say it was god-awful or anything like that. I just think it was a little bit less than what I thought it could be to end this. But that's my opinion. I want to make this as spoiler-free as possible. And usually at the end of these reviews, I give you a little bit more. Like on the first one, I talked about the Fear Street books I still had as a kid. The second one, I talk about the Fear Street books that I had found at a thrift store around me between the time the trailer came out and now. So I've kind of added to that collection. But it's only been a week since my last review, so I haven't found or picked up anything Fear Street related. So I wanted to give a little bit more meat on the bone to this spoiler-free review. And what I decided to do was grab some CDs. Yes, I still own CDs, not many, but some, that were big to me around the time of, early 90s. So I didn't pick anything after 94, I think. But these are just a couple big albums that I hung on to that to me were, big game changer albums. Some of these songs you did hear in this franchise. And I thought it would be kind of cool to bring them to the table and bring back some nostalgia for anybody who did grow up during this time and had some of these albums back in the day. All right, so I'm going to go through a couple of these. I don't even know how many I picked, maybe 10, 12 or something like that. Throughout the years, I had traded them, or they had broke or they were thrown out. So I did have a lot more CDs around this time than what I'm going to show here. These are just the ones that I still have that are around this time that were big to me, growing up. I would have been in about middle school. Yeah, I would have been in middle school during this time. So that's kind of when these albums were around. So I think I grabbed from like 91 to like 94. But let's get into it and leave down below any of these that you remember, any other ones that I may have missed. Like I said, I can name some off the bat, which I will at the end, that I had that I no longer have. But the first one here is Stone Temple Pilots' Core. This was a big album for me back in the day, and even their follow-up to this was really cool, but I think that might have been like 95. So I picked this one to show you guys just because, again, this was the big one. This was the debut, and this is the one I really dug around that time. Now, there was so many songs, especially in Fear Street 1994, that they may have played stuff of what I'm going to show, and I might not recall it. But yeah, so Core, great album, Stone Temple Pilots. Rip Scott Weiland here. So that's the first one I grabbed. The next one I grabbed was self-titled Rage Against the Machine, which was another huge album back then. You had things like Bomb Track, Killing the Name. I mean, that was the big one that you know, we didn't want to make sure our parents were around when we were playing this. And the big one that everybody knows was Freedom on this album. So what an album this was. I believe this was their debut album as well. They had the follow-up with Bulls on Parade, which was the follow-up to this one. So again, a great album, big time for me around that time frame of 1994. Another one, this song was definitely in Fear Street. And this is 9 Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral. And, you know, Closer was the song that they played in Fear Street 1994. So again, that was a huge album to me as well. So definitely Downward Spiral was a big one. You know, I was rocking 9 Inch Nails shirts back then, Stone Temple Pilot shirts back then. So that was another big one for me. All right, another huge one for me in middle school was Offspring Smash. Now again, these, I would love to see what some of these discs look like back here. I guarantee they are scratched to bits because I played these things all the time. Oh my God, yeah, I don't even know if you can see it, but these things are hacked up. It's been a long time since I've listened to any of these at all, but I still have a CD rack in my area here with CDs from, you know, that era, and then stuff I was listening to in high school and stuff I was listening to in college, and then, you know, we got into the more like Napster and burning and iPods and all that stuff. So I was able to keep a lot of the CDs because I was heavily into music, and, you know, before I was really collecting DVDs, I was collecting CDs. So that was a big thing for me growing up. All right, another huge one, early 90s, White Zombie. This is the one with Thunder Kiss 65. So again, huge hit, great album here. They had another follow-up with More Human Than Human on it. I think that might have been like mid-90s as well. But this was early 90s, White Zombie. So this is another big one that I was listening to back in the day. And obviously we all know White Zombie, then it became Rob Zombie, and we know how he's connected to the horror genre now. So great album that I used to listen to quite a bit back in the day. All right, another big one, early 90s, boom, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. This was a big album in the early 90s. Again, it's dark in here, so I think this might have been, if I have to guess, 91, 92, this album probably came out. But that was a big one. All right, this next one's a heavy hitter. This is a big one. I believe there was a song in Fear Street from this one, but I could be wrong, but it's Nirvana, Nevermind, which was a huge album back then, followed up by In Utero, which was another mid-90s. It had to have been because it was right before Kurt Cobain passed. So I was in middle school when that happened. I think I was probably in 7th or 8th grade when he passed. So Nevermind, which was definitely probably 91, 92. All right, so some of these are getting close. I believe these were like 94, maybe a little bit earlier. You guys might know. Again, this was a big one for me. This is Bush, 16 Stone. So this was a huge album for me. I absolutely love this. I was a big Bush fan in middle school and early high school. So 16 Stone was a great one. This thing is full of hits, man. It's got everything Zen. It's got Little Things Come Down, Machine Head, Glycerine. I mean, this thing is loaded with hit singles here. So Bush, 16 Stone. Another band at that time that kind of really got me locked in, similar to Bush, was this band Silverchair, Frog Stomp. Great album. Tomorrow was a big one. Israel's Son was another big one. So if you guys remember Frog Stomp, this may have been like tail end 94, I believe. Again, before I did this, I didn't do much research. I kind of just grabbed stuff that I knew was like early to mid 90s that I still owned, that were big in my collection back in the day. So yeah, Silverchair, Frog Stomp. All right, this was a big one. It's the only soundtrack in this mix right now, and it is the Crow soundtrack, which this right here just gave, you know, soundtracks just a whole new meaning. There was great ones like the follow-up to this with like City of Angels and Spawn and stuff like that. Like killer soundtracks were coming out at that time. These bands will like get me on a soundtrack because these things were hot, and this, in my opinion, is what kind of started that craze. I mean, this had some great bands on it: Cure, Stone Temple Pilots, Nine Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine, Violent Femmes, Rollins Band, Helmet, Pantera. I mean, man, you had a ton of stuff on here, and even songs that became hit singles on the radio. So The Crow, this one is a big one. I'm sure you guys remember it as well. Let me know down below what your favorite song on that Crow soundtrack was. All right, so again, it's funny because I'm looking at these again, and this is like a hall of fame of like early to mid 90s rock here. And we have Green Day with Dookie. Honestly, like this was a great album, and this was so big for me, and it was kind of getting like, you know, punk into the mix at the time. It was a little bit different than what we were used to. I feel like this and Offspring were like head to head at the time, like who was bigger at the time for kids my age, and you were like an Offspring guy or a Green Day guy. I can remember all that. You know, we had shirts and stuff like that. This album blew up. I had this poster on my wall growing up. What a great album. But to be honest, like Green Day had another great album, Kerplunk, which came out before this, which I didn't know about until this one was out. So great early Green Day stuff out there. And then there was another one, like that first album, was it called like Something Miles Away? But cool stuff here. This thing is loaded with singles, guys, so I'm sure you guys all remember Green Day Dookie. Another heavy hitter, we got Alice in Chains, we've got Dirt. This is a big one. I'm pretty sure we may have caught a song of this on Fear Street. I could be wrong, but there was so many hits on this album. I don't know how you couldn't. You had Wood, Rooster. You had a bunch of stuff in here, man. Alice in Chains, Dirt. What a great album this was back then. Couple more. All right, this one is a little bit different. This wasn't a band that was like all over the radio and stuff like that. And, you know, when Green Day was starting to hit, you know, people were starting to take a look at punk. Offspring was kind of the same way. So, you know, bands like Rancid. Another big one that I just fell in love with was Pennywise, which was such a killer band back then. And I'm not sure what, you know, they're doing now. They could still be around for all I know. But what an awesome album this was here. This was a great one. I have a bunch of Pennywise albums. I don't know if this is self-titled, but this was the first one that I got. I can remember that. Then they had other ones like About Time and stuff like that. But great album, Pennywise. And another thing that really got me hooked on these guys was an arcade game called Top Skater, which was a big hit in our arcades around my area, and it was very hard to come by. So, you know, some arcades had it, some didn't, but they had a whole track list of Pennywise in there, and, you know, my brother and I fell in love with that. All right, you can't talk about Hall of Fame albums of the 90s without talking about Metallica Black album here. This was huge. Man, full of hits. Enter Sandman, Unforgiven. I mean, you name it, it came off this album. What a banger this thing was. Still holds up to this day. Love this album. Again, I could have chose from a couple different Metallica albums, but I wanted to make sure I hit this one because this was the big one at the time. But, you know, anything like pre-Load, I would say is amazing. At the time, though, even when Load came out, I was still into it. But, you know, going back on it now, it's like everything pre-Load was the stuff that I was really into before, and then I was into Load a little bit, and then it was like after Load, I think it was like Reload, and then I kind of got out of Metallica for a little bit. So, yeah, that Metallica Black album, whatever you want to call it, that's definitely one that I'm sure a lot of you had in your collection. All right, this next one's a big one. I could be on the cusp here. This could have been 95. Let me see. Oh, no. 94. So perfect. I know this was kind of on the tail end of the stuff we were talking about, but another big album that came out around then was Korn's debut album. Man, this thing... I remember my friend Mark and I listened to this for the first time, and it was like we've never heard anything like this. Like, I mean, you're going from bands like Offspring, Green Day, and even Alice in Chains and stuff like that, even Metallica, and then all of a sudden you pop in Korn, it was like, man, this is something we've never heard before. So what a great album this was back then. It hit us hard and fast and heavy, and Korn was a big one, and they're still kicking butt today. So again, Korn, this is the one with Blind and Baltong and all that other stuff. So check this one out. So I have one more left. It's not, save the best for last, which is kind of what was in the pile, but this was another one where I could have grabbed a couple different albums, but I thought this was the one to kind of talk about because it was really in that mid-90 range, and that is Tool Undertow, which was a big one back in the day, and they had a great album before this, and they had a great album after this, but yeah, Tool Undertow was a big one. And that was another one too that was just very different for the time. So when we heard that, we were like all about it. But yeah, gang, those were a couple albums I just grabbed because those were big ones for me around the mid 90s. I did have other ones in there because that was really big into like the grunge era. So like Blind Melon, Collective Soul, Candlebox, Pearl Jam. We had Soundgarden. That was a big album back then with Spoon Man and Black Hole Sun. All those kind of albums, like I had all those. I don't have them anymore, so they may have just either were traded because there was a point in time where I was trading albums to get albums, as I started to get older. So we'd go to a store, trade in a lot of our old stuff in order to pay for some new stuff. So that's where a lot of mine went. But these are the ones that I definitely still hung on to. Like I said, they may not even work. The condition is probably terrible, but I just wanted to kind of make this interesting instead of just a quick spoiler-free review. So I always wanted to try to get something different that kind of has to do with this time at the end of these videos. So I hope you stuck around and checked these out. And again, this is Garrett at Born to Be Rad. If you like this kind of stuff, please like, subscribe, share this video around. Please comment underneath and let me know what you think of these albums. Did you grow up around this time? Are these albums that you caught later down the road? But to me, these albums are big albums that kind of set the way for a lot of stuff that came out after this. Let me know down below which one of these you dug. What am I missing? Maybe there's some I never heard of. Maybe I had them in my collection, I do not anymore, but post down below some of your thoughts about the music that came out around this time. And like I always say, stay rad.